Hi, this is Neil Clements, and this is The Real Deal with Neil. So today we're talking about submittals, approvals, and the land subdividing process. This is part 3 of 4 in our series about how to subdivide land, how to do minor subdivisions and exempt subdivisions. And so today we're going to be talking about who's going to approve your stuff, what do they need to see, what is the process, and how do you make sure that your lots are sellable, desirable, and marketable. So let's get to it. So let's start today by talking about usability. And we hit on it a little bit in the last video about making sure that the lots, don't have floodplain, don't have easements, don't have crazy topography up and down. But as far as usability, we want to make sure that we're not creating lots whenever we subdivide that are going to be hard to sell. So an example of that especially is like a huge electrical line running through a property. Maybe you had to put like a water tower in a property to supply water. Maybe you had to put some kind of retention pond or detention pond on the property. The different things that can make a property not desirable are kind of endless. But a mistake that I've made in the past that I want to share with you is that when we looked at making lots, we used to think, well, all 5-acre lots or 1 acre, 10 acre, whatever, size lot we were making are created equal. But in reality, they're not. On our rural subdivisions, I've typically seen that the lots with the most privacy, meaning if they don't have any neighbors or they're the edge lots, tend to sell first. Your kind of ones in the middle tend to sell next. And then your kind of ones that have 2 neighbors on either side, those are the ones that tend to sell last for us. And after doing like 15 or 20 of these in the past few years, we've kind of got it down. The ones we got a premium price a little bit, the ones we have to take a little bit off. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that you need to vary the lot sizes a little bit to cater to the demand of your audience. You need to price them all a little bit differently. You need to have premiums on the premium lots. You need to take off money on the ones that maybe have floodplain or transmission lines or gas lines running through them. And you need to make sure that all of your lots are usable, desirable, and that you can sell them for what you think you're going to sell them for. Because you need to start acting more like a builder or somebody who has, lots to sell where they're going to do different premiums than you do a land investor. And so you're getting into an entirely different game. And you need to know how to do that, because the risk that you take with selling all of these lots next to each other is that, let's say that you have, 5-10 acre lots and you sell one of them for 150, you're asking 200 on the next one. Well, now you've created your own comp, especially if you're putting in an MLS or using a realtor. And it's like you're not going to sell one for 150 and the next one for 200 because you're just competing against yourself. And so you've also got to watch that. If you have all the same size lots and you take 10,000 off one of them, well, you took 10,000 off all of them. And so whenever you only have one property to sell, it's not a big deal. You took 10,000 off. Whenever you have 5 or 10 properties to sell, you just took 50 to 100,000 off. So I think you see what I'm saying, but you've got to be really intentional about how you design the properties that you're going with, the pricing strategy that you have to make sure that it's all desirable and that people are going to come and buy it quickly. So a big consideration is, are all of your lots buildable? And you may think that just because you did an exempt subdivision, all of your lots are maybe 10 acres plus, you met all these exemptions somehow, that your lots are buildable, but that's not true. And so as we talked about in the property review video, you've also got other layers. You've got road frontage, you've got legal access, you've got all these other things. Some counties we work in, you got to have a certain permit, like a culvert permit. Other counties need to see verification of utilities. There's driveway spacing that comes into account when you have a road that's 55 miles an hour plus. And so just don't think because you have an exempt subdivision, you had a surveyor do it, and all of this is going to go well just because you did it exempt and you're, exempt from all the regulations. You're exempt from the platting regulations, but you're not exempt from the other development regulations that the subdivision guidelines have done in that county or city or approving authority. And so you need to be incredibly careful about that, because there's people who get in trouble that say they come and they've divided their property, they're exempt, and then they sell the lots and represent that they're buildable, and then you sell them, and then that's where attorneys get involved, and it's not a fun day for anybody. So how do we make sure it's buildable? Well, we go to the county and we do a pre-development meeting with every property that we're looking at, or the city, whatever the approving board is, and we sit down with them and we ask them, hey, what do you need to see from this, right? And there's even some counties that we work in that require us to file an affidavit of an exempt subdivision and make sure that it still meets our guidelines. And we've gotten, demand notices from attorneys in the past that if you didn't do this in this county, you didn't do this. And sometimes we had to clear that up. And so it's really interesting, the stuff that you encounter whenever you think that you're exempt. So don't make the mistake mistake of just because you do an exempt subdivision from not following all the other guidelines that make a property buildable. And I already mentioned about meeting with the approving authorities. I think that's incredibly important. I can't emphasize enough how important that is for anybody subdividing property to go through like a pre-development meeting or go through like a quick Zoom or a phone call with somebody who's in charge. And I'm not talking about the front desk worker, I'm talking about the approving authority for the county, for the city, whoever it is. Go through that meeting. It's free almost always. And make sure that you're sitting down with the person who's actually going to tell you whether or not you can do this, because you might be $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 deep into like a minor subdivision and then get told no for something that you didn't have to waste all that money and all that time for, and you wasted the seller's time, your money. You won't make the same mistake again once you do it once. The other layer to this is that you can also be in some areas inside of a rural county, but be within what's called an ETJ, an extraterritorial jurisdiction. And this is just in the Texas areas that I work in, which essentially just means that a city has taken accountability or approving authority for an area that's close to their city limits, but it's not really in their city limits. So why is that a big deal? Well, now instead of just the county subdivision guidelines, you also have to deal with the city subdivision guidelines, which is normally a lot more strict and potentially even has zoning. And so then it becomes a lot more complicated. You have to have 2 different approving authorities in some instances. Sometimes it's only 1. Bottom line, what am I trying to tell you? I'm trying to tell you that no matter how much you think you're exempt or minor, you still have to follow the guidelines, and you need to know the guidelines. You need to read the documents, the subdivision regulations, the zoning regulations. You need to talk with the approving authorities. You need to meet with them. You need to take the time to do things that you probably wouldn't normally do to de-risk your subdivision. And that's probably the biggest thing that I see from unsuccessful people who are doing these subdivisions to successful, is that if you just follow the rules and regulations and you can help show them what their own rules and regulations are and show them how what you're doing is within their guidelines, it's going to go a lot better for you versus if you just do what you want, you sell them, and then you have to have an attorney come back at you later. The other thing to know with like the timelines around all this, a lot of times in the counties and areas that we work in, if we're doing kind of like a minor plat and we're submitting these plans, they have to be submitted on like a certain date. Typically that's 30 days out from the day you're ready to submit them for some reason. In addition to that, they have about 30 days to review them. And then they have a certain time frame to actually take them to the court to actually get approval, or whatever governing authority is going to look at that. City council, will have the next city council meeting and some other different things. And so depending on the areas you're working in, some areas are 12 months, 18 months especially for major subdivisions. For minor subdivisions, sometimes that's as short as 6 to 9, sometimes as short as 4 if you really know what you're doing. Bottom line is the stuff takes a while if you're not doing it exempt. If we're contracting with seller and we're doing a minor and exempt subdivision, we're always giving ourselves, at least 3 to 4 months of due diligence, and then closing once all of our platting and all of our work is done, which is normally a 4 to 6 month closing. And you need to know the game. You need to figure out how to work with these counties to achieve things you want to achieve, and then also the things that they want to achieve, and work together on it. Last thing I want to leave you with on this video is the number of lots. My philosophy on the number of lots and what we're trying to do is I'm going to do the least amount of work for the most reward possible. And so, for instance, if we're looking at a rural subdivision and we've got 50 acres and I'm looking at 2 25-acre lots versus 5 10-acre lots. Well, if the price per acre and the days on market is identical for the 10-acre lot development after everything versus the 25-acre lots, well, I'm just going to sell 25-acre lots. If the 50-acre price per acre is the same, well, I'm just going to sell one 50-acre lot. My point is I'm not subdividing just to subdivide, right? If I'm going to subdivide, it's either going to add value or it's going to help me sell it quicker and easier. The thing that I want to tell you is that don't just subdivide just to subdivide. Like, if you're going to go out there, you're going to do the work, you're going to put in all this, why would you create more work for yourself for the exact same amount of profit? And so my perspective is I'm asking myself the question, like I said, how can I do the least amount of work possible while getting the maximum reward possible for that work? Because there are times when we've looked at major subdivides, installing streets, utilities, partnering with a developer to do the horizontals before we go vertical and build the houses. We've even thought about putting on our 1-acre lot subdivisions, putting mobile homes on there. We've thought about going down the chain of supply here to become our own developer through the whole process. But what we've realized is that for me and my business, for my objectives financially, the most lucrative thing for us to do is just to push paper, right? Just to be able to get our approvals, whether exempt or minor, get our approvals, sell the lots, whether they're paper or whether they're actually developed, and let somebody else take all the risk of putting the houses on there and deal with all the really the nitty gritty and the hard stuff. And so for us, that's what's worked best. That's what I would encourage you, especially starting out, is just to push paper. However, there's a huge opportunity for you to do even more than that. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this. That was video 3 of 4 in our series on land development. Now, the next video that I want you to tune into is talking about how do we verify utility access for our development, and then also how do we do our improvements? Like, what improvements are going to add value to the subdivision beyond just the paper improvement that we're doing? How do we add even more value than that? So guys, please stay with us. We'll see you on the next one.